Okay, thanks Admiral Blair for those really excellent remarks. The first panel we have is going to focus on Myanmar's social and economic conditions, and we have three real experts on those issues with us today. We will begin with Dr. Zaw U, who's Executive Director of Myanmar Development Resource Institute's Center for Economic and Social Policy. He will be followed by Dr. Toshihiro Kudo, who as of now is Director General of the Institute for Developing Economies Research and Planning Department. IDE is based in Tokyo, of course. But next week, I understand that he will be moving to a new position to join the faculty of the Graduate Research Institute for Policy Studies in Tokyo, known as GRIPS. And then finally, we'll have Vikram Nehru, who's a senior associate at the Asia program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and previously served for 30 years at the World Bank in a number of senior positions. I think there's no doubt that Myanmar today has changed rather dramatically in the past 4 years since the transition to a quasi-civilian government. And so just very quickly before turning to our panelists, I wanted to provide a little bit of context on where things are currently, and so have a couple of slides I wanted to show you. And if we can get those up there, that's great. The first slide provides some indices of where Myanmar fits in terms of comparisons to other countries in the world across a number of areas. Well, if we can, there we go. Okay. These are by no means definitive, but these are from fairly well-respected groups. And so if you look at the very top, the first shows the annual Freedom in the World publication that Freedom House does, and ranks countries according to their levels of democratic development. And you can see the most recent year, 2014, Myanmar ranks 162 out of 195 countries surveyed. And if you go back a few years to 2007, before any of the reforms took place, you can see they were at 191, and so made some modest improvements. Next, we have the UN Development Program's Human Development Index, and in that case, you can see that, in fact, there is a little bit of backsliding on Myanmar's behalf, according to the UNDP. 150 out of 187 currently. Previously, they were 132, though that was out of a smaller base number of countries. The Fragile States Index, which is put out by the Fund for Peace, is a measure of national stability, and you can see that there has been some modest improvements over the past 7-8 years in Myanmar in terms of its ranking compared to other countries. The World Bank puts out what is called the Country Policy and Institutional Assessment, which is something of a measure of the national comparison of the poorest countries in the world. Now, there's no real basis of previous comparison because Myanmar was not listed until 2013, and as you can see, they're 63rd out of the 81 poorest countries. In terms of doing business, World Bank puts out rankings every year, but here too, Myanmar wasn't added to that list until 2014. So between 2014 and 2015, things have stayed roughly the same. World Economic Forum has its Global Competitiveness Index, and there too, there's no long-term comparison that we have. There are only 2 years, and there's been a very modest improvement that you can see there. Corruption, the Transparency International puts out an annual index of corruption, and in that case you can see a fairly significant improvement over the past 7 years from when Myanmar was listed as dead last among all the countries surveyed and is now 156th out of 175. And then finally, just in terms of the number of political prisoners that are held in Myanmar, 2011, when some of the releases, before the releases took place, there were about 2,000 or so political prisoners, according to Congressional Research Service. And as of now, there are about 75 political prisoners in prison, and another 186 or so who are awaiting trial. Now, here's another sort of snapshot of some of the developments that have been taking place in Myanmar. This lists what are called the 11 commitments that President Thein Sein made in 2012 when President Obama made his trip to Myanmar for the first time, for becoming the first American president to visit that country. And President Thein Sein then reiterated those commitments 6 months later when he came to the United States to visit Washington and visit the White House. As characterized by the State Department not so long ago, they said that of the 11 commitments, most of them remain only partially fulfilled. But what you see here is an assessment that was done by an NGO in a little bit more detail. And according to that NGO, in fact, there's only been one of the commitments that has been fulfilled, and that is the signing of the additional protocol to the UN Nuclear Agency's Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement. In 6 of the other 11 areas, they assess that there's only been partial fulfillment. 3 of them that they have not been fulfilled. And then there's one, when it comes to arms trade with North Korea, there's uncertainty about where that stands. So I just wanted to give that as a little bit of context. These are all, of course, not scientific assessments, but I think they provide a little bit of background.